I find most intriguing. Why? Why did he feel he had to campaign on a promise to release this stuff and then pivot almost immediately to lying about it being a hoax or claiming that he barely knew the man? And, of course, refusing and resisting violently and furiously all attempts to get these documents released.
James O'Brien has offered a striking summary of the confusion surrounding Donald Trump and the Epstein controversy. With every new development seeming to raise more questions than answers, following the story can feel like trying to piece together a puzzle with half the pieces missing. And that's exactly what makes this story so difficult to ignore. Before we dive into the full story, comment where you're watching from, and don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Let's break down O'Brien's argument and why he believes the confusion itself may be part of the bigger political story.
First time I've ever actually pinned down what it's like to try to keep track of Donald Trump's presidency, or even perhaps Donald Trump's life. It's as if sort of someone has accidentally jumbled up 4 different jigsaws in the same box, and you're trying to do that jigsaw. Every now and then you find a corner, and then you find 7 more, which is really confusing. Or you find 2 bits that clearly do go together, maybe even 4 bits. But then nothing. So you've got, oh Lord, where does this go? There's no sky. Hey, so that's what it's like some mornings. Some days, of course, we can call upon Simon Marks to have a look down the back of the sofa and find pieces that we'd missed, or that we didn't know we needed, or that we didn't even realise existed. But of course, when he brings them to the table, all he does sometimes is create even more confusion and mystery about what precisely we're trying to pin down. What is the actual picture that we are trying to put together? And I don't know that there ever will be one. I really don't. I think it's like trying to nail jelly to the wall, or indeed herd cats. And that perhaps is the point, is that you put so much obfuscation, litigation, intimidation, you put so much in the space that the idea of there being a simple thread of comprehension becomes absolutely ridiculous, absolutely impossible. And the temptation then, for those of us who are charged with trying to keep track of some of this stuff, the temptation then is to just give up, to throw your hands up in the air and go, oh, forget about it. That is, I think, what the plan is when somebody like Steve Bannon, the convicted criminal who remains a confidant of Donald Trump and has been pardoned by Donald Trump for some, if not all of his crimes. Again, it's impossible to keep track. There's another bit of a different jigsaw. When he talks about flooding the zone with bleep, that's what they're doing. If you flood the zone with bleep, you can tell we haven't got BBC budgets, can't you? That I have to do that myself. I just gave the game away. But if you are flooding the zone with bleep, then you are making it almost impossible for people who want to actually keep track of things, or who want to try to keep track of things. And then you've got the other thing that is clearly going on, and this has become clear this week in a heap of ways. The only thing I didn't really credit was how complicit UK media individuals and institutions would be in Donald Trump's determination to create a media ecosystem in the White House where nobody will ask him questions about Jeffrey Epstein. Just pause and think about that just for a moment, because I think it's really important. Again, it's really easy to be distracted by pieces from a different jigsaw. But why on earth is Donald Trump bigging up the half-wits at GBBs, of all things? Answer, because he wants, even with foreign journalists, as Simon Marks again warned us months ago, he wants the press corps at the White House, he wants the journalists who have access to the president to be people and institutions who are too frightened, too bent, or too supine to actually ask him questions he doesn't want to be asked. I joked with you, probably in February or March of this year, that we would end up with a press corps that essentially says every day a variation on the question that they'll take it in turns to ask of how, on a scale of 1 to 10, how wonderful are you, Mr. President? And that was a joke in February or March of this year. I don't think it's very funny now. I don't even think it's necessarily a joke now. That is the direction of traffic that we have seen the United States media forced to go in. And this week we've seen the UK media as well co-opted into that with the connivance, oddly, of the Daily Telegraph. And various other sort of right-wing lobbyists who somehow ended up with jobs advising the BBC on independence. So that is partly why the story that broke overnight does not feel as guaranteed to bring down a president as it would in almost any other circumstances. It is yet another mark of how far we have fallen and how mad things have become. The simple notion that the old rules no longer apply. And this hasn't happened by accident, has it? This isn't something that we've suddenly waken up and gone, oh, whoops-a-daisy. We seem to have abandoned all semblance of transparency, integrity, ethics and evidence, and ended up in a place where the man who invented fake news can be pursuing a vendetta against, for example, the BBC. But that's not what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about this curious combination of conditions whereby Donald Trump can campaign on a promise to release the Epstein files, and then, having become president, can be diametrically and violently opposed to the release of the Epstein files. And it doesn't actually make sense at first glance, does it? Because if he had anything to hide, why would, again, are we doing that thing? Are we making a different jigsaw? Applying logic? Thinking just because he did something on Monday means that necessarily entails that he would have to do something on Wednesday? What would it be? I don't know, but here we are. When he was campaigning, even as recently as September of last year, he said he would have no problem releasing more files related to the convicted sex trafficker and paedophile Jeffrey Epstein. Asked why a so-called list of clients who had visited Epstein's private island had not yet been made public, Trump said it probably will be. I don't know whether that list exists. I'm not sure it does, but we do know that there are thousands and thousands and thousands of pages of documents that do exist. The email exchanges, essentially, between Epstein and a whole heap of people who perhaps might once have been somewhat optimistically described as the great and the good. He describes Trump in terms. He talks about Trump having spent hours in his house with one of his victims. He talks about Epstein talks about Trump being the most disgusting man that he has ever met. Again, you sort of find yourself wondering why he would bother lying about this stuff long before he found himself in legal jeopardy. And, of course, after he found himself in legal jeopardy, why would you lie about things that would be easily disproved if they ever came to court? You know that the trafficking of girls and young women saw him convicted. It wasn't enough, of course, to see people like Andrew Windsor and Peter Mandelson and Sarah Ferguson cut off all contact with him, but eventually his crimes caught up with him and he went to jail. And for some reason, even the Republican, we probably need a bit of help anatomizing this. The Republican machine, or the MAGA machine, because they, I think, still remain largely different things. The MAGA machine got very, very excited about this. Even the QAnon conspiracy and hoaxers were talking about VIP paedophile rings. I mean, in their case, they emanated from the cellar of a building in New York that doesn't have a cellar, didn't it? But the way in which the story has split Trump's base right down the middle absolutely fascinates me. On what possible grounds could you not want these files to be released, if not a terror of what is in them? You can see why they've worked so hard to get the phrase Trump derangement syndrome into common parlance. Now, I don't know if everybody who's used the phrase Trump derangement syndrome with a straight face is actually as desperate to keep these files secret as Donald Trump appears to be. Or perhaps they shill for or work for people who are as desperate to keep these files secret as Donald Trump seems to be, or whether people who use the phrase Trump derangement syndrome with a straight face are just too sort of lazy and careless to actually think about why some of us are so concerned about the nature of the man who has his finger over the nuclear button, or the nature of the man who has the economic health of our planet in many ways in the palm of his hand, or the nature of a man who was clearly very good friends with a sex trafficker and paedophile. You get that phrase Trump derangement derangement syndrome into public discourse, and you are helping the man who is desperate for his friendship and the depth of his association with Jeffrey Epstein to be kept secret, keep it secret. I don't know that everybody who uses the phrase can be accused of complicity in any cover-up, but it is either that, it's either complicity in a cover-up, or it's a level of careless ignorance so extraordinary that you wonder how they can sleep straight in bed at night. Weirdly, they're the same people that told you to vote for Brexit, that Liz Truss was a genius, that Boris Johnson was a stand-up guy who you could trust with your life savings, that austerity, yada, 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 yada. We could go on. It's exactly the same people who use the phrase Trump derangement syndrome who also sold you pup after pup after pup after pup after pup in the context of British politics, in the context of domestic politics. I'm going to tell you something. I hope it doesn't make me sound like a bigger plum than usual, but it's one of those subjects where you may know more about the detail, the family tree, if you like, of this story than I do. I've followed it a little bit more closely than the average bear, but I haven't followed it completely closely because I didn't quite understand where it was going to lead, or where it was going to. It was in Washington, not New York, the pizza place. Forgive me for that. I've done that a few times now. I've got one of those mental blocks on it. I say in my head it's in Washington, and then my mental block goes, no, it's New York. So I say New York out loud while thinking, no, I bet it's Washington. And then you text me to say it was Washington. Of course it was Washington. It's the seat of the US government, the seat of the US political establishment. So I've got two questions for you. The first is, why hasn't this story gone away? 03456060973. And the second is, why, and this is a weird question to ask you, and obviously we have to be a little bit careful. It's why I'm not going to ask you the question, why is Trump so desperate to keep it secret? But I want you to think about this. Why did he campaign on a promise to release something that he's now so desperate to keep secret? That is, I think, one of those examples of us getting about 30 pieces of the same jigsaw assembled before we accidentally pick up a piece that someone's put back in the wrong box and we can't place it on the board for love nor money. But why did he campaign on a promise to do something that he is now desperate not to do? And I mean, I'll try if I can to bring you some of the most alarming elements of these emails. I mean, the detail is extraordinary, and as I've said to you a few times, I think, although you lose track of certainty, don't you, at times like this, when you're trying to do one jigsaw with the contents of 5 different boxes, you lose track of certainty, even sometimes of objectivity. Is it right to say that any other president would have been absolutely banjaxed by these kinds of revelations? With Trump, there's a sense of, oh, here we go again. Here we go again. So why did he campaign on a promise to do something that the moment he got into power, he became desperate not to do? And that speaks to both the MAGA machine, it speaks to the American political establishment, it speaks to the relationship between power and media that was once, of course, charged with speaking truth to power. And listen, I don't know that it's possible to hold a position that's sympathetic to Trump at this moment, but if it is, I'd love to hear it. Like, there is actually an answer to this question that doesn't lead us to the most obvious and unpleasant conclusion. A conclusion that's very easy to arrive at if you've seen footage of Trump and Epstein sort of leering together at a room full of young women, or you remember the comments Trump has made about beauty pageants and access to dressing rooms and things like that. But obviously we can't go there. But the question of why did he because he didn't have to. Or maybe he did. That's what I mean by the possibility of you having followed things more closely than I did. What do you think explains the decision to campaign on a promise to do something that became politically toxic for him the moment he got into power, so much so that he remains, the lies follow the lies follow the lies. Extraordinary to think that the BBC is preparing to apologise to a man who has only ever told the truth by accident. It's extraordinary, isn't it? But that's where we are now. But the the well-worn playbook of how he hopes to kick this into the long grass. It's a Democrat conspiracy, even though Republicans are queuing up to vote for the release of the documents. It's a hoax. We've literally jailed the man. And we've got photographs of you leering with him at young women. We've got photographs of you, your wife, him and his girlfriend. It's all a hoax. It's extraordinary. You signed his birthday card and then, of course, claimed that you hadn't. So that naive belief you have, that naive belief that you're taught by your parents as a child that the truth really matters, it's never felt more imperiled, has it, on a global scale? And remember, I mean, I presume if you're sending me a message, as one person has, saying, why are you talking about this? It's not even happening in Britain. I presume that you're either a massive Trump fan who is finally suffering from a dose of caveat emptor, or you've forgotten the influence and the impact that the President of the United States has upon our country at any time, up to and including threatening to sue the BBC for £1 billion. It's not even Idiot's Corner, that kind of contribution to the programme. It's a call for matron or summon the nurse kind of territory. But you get all of that noise, all of that distraction into the space where once we'd have been a little bit clear-eyed and focused on this extraordinary question of why you campaign on a promise to do something within your power, and then the moment you achieve that power, you become passionately opposed to doing the thing that you promised to do. Listen, if that's not the thing you find most interesting about what broke yesterday and the ripples that emanate from it, the rock that was thrown into the pool, then, give me a ring and talk me through your perspectives as well. But that is where I am at the moment. That's the thing I find most intriguing. Why? Why did he feel he had to campaign on a promise to release this stuff and then pivot almost immediately to lying about it being a hoax or claiming that he barely knew the man? And, of course, refusing and resisting violently and furiously all attempts to get these documents released.
What James O'Brien's monologue really captures is the sheer disorientation of trying to follow Trump-era politics. His jigsaw puzzle analogy works because every new development seems to add another piece, while somehow making the overall picture even harder to understand. And perhaps the most striking part is how normal this level of political confusion has started to feel. Stories that might once have dominated the news for weeks can now appear, disappear, and be replaced by something else before the public even has time to process them. That constant cycle creates a strange effect. People become so accustomed to political controversy that almost nothing feels surprising anymore. Then there's the question at the center of O'Brien's argument. Why campaign on releasing the Epstein files if you later become resistant to their release? That contradiction deserves scrutiny, but it's important not to jump from unanswered questions to assumptions about guilt. The real issue is whether political promises, public statements, and later actions can be reconciled. And that connects directly to O'Brien's criticism of the phrase Trump derangement syndrome. His argument is that dismissing every criticism as irrational can become a way of avoiding the criticism itself. Instead of debating the evidence, the focus shifts toward attacking the people asking the questions. That is the larger concern here. In a political environment filled with competing narratives, the challenge is separating facts from speculation, accountability from partisan spin, and genuine questions from assumptions. And ultimately, that may be the most important takeaway. When the political noise becomes overwhelming, the answer shouldn't be to stop asking questions. It should be to ask better ones. Let me know what you think in the comments.